Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Mardek, and we are back in wherever the heck this place is. In fact, it is quite literally question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. So, as we were saying earlier, there are a few doors that we can go through, and, well, they're equally dark and desolate. So nothing really of note in here. I do wonder if you guys have any ideas as to where exactly we are right now. Because, well, it's odd. And it almost looks like, yeah, like this area here where there appear to be seats and tables. It seems like at one point in time, there probably were many people in this area, but none right now. Oh, and here there's actually a save crystal, so that's nice. I suppose we don't need to worry about taking damage in here, although it does seem as though there are no enemies in this area, oddly enough. It is truly empty. So I believe we've gone through all of these doors except for the ones at the bottom here. Engineering, it's locked tight. No amount of shouting at it or insulting its mother will cause it to open. There's nothing there, and then I think there was also one at the top here. We can go through. However, still, not much in here. So, hard to know what to make of all that. And as for where we go from here, I see that there are actually some ways out through here, and, well, at least for the time being, more of the same. Wait, what?
The Dark Temple? This place was supposed to have been sealed long ago to keep the evil within. This would explain the presence of the monsters above. The absence of the warding stone must have allowed them to travel out of the temple. The stranger may be after the Dark Crystal, though I am afraid we must stop him at all costs. But we must be careful. This place is vile, full of eldritch magics. It is dangerous here.
Well, yes, but the same can be said of any dungeon. Mardek's dealt with things far worse than this before. Eh, Mardek? Well, sure I have. Like, one time, where I went into a cave that was all evil, and I didn't die even though it was evil. Thanks, Mardek.
I am not one to retreat or back down from a mission, but this place, you may not truly understand exactly how evil it is. To say that I have a bad feeling about this would be an understatement. Still, you are confident, and we will make an effort to track down this intruder and deal with him. Just make peace with your gods first. How I hope to, Lord, that he has not found it yet.
Well, let's go then. With great confidence. Okay, so, no pressure, anybody, but may or may not be that we just found our way into the root of all evil. So, we'll head into this dark temple and run into some dark elementals. We've never seen any enemies like this before. In fact, they're actually called elementals. They are very physically resistant, but no magic defense. Very dark resistance. They'll heal a ton if they get hit by dark damage. And then they're very weak to light, and a little bit of resistances for the other elements here. Okay, so what does that mean for Charla? I think let's test out a couple lightning bolts here and see how they fare. A little bit of damage, but certainly not enough to take these guys out. They don't have a ton of HP, but if we try, say, with some more flames from Donovan, how does that match up? Still not going to be enough. They do get a chance to take a turn here. Energy Vortex, that sounds ominous. And they are targeting Mardek, which is not a good thing for us, because Mardek, of course, being a light elemental character, is inherently a little bit weak to dark. You see here he has 20% weakness to dark, whereas no one else does at the moment. So, if anything, we'd like for them to attack anyone other than Mardek. It is Slinik's turn, though. And for Slinik, he can use physical attacks. And these guys are actually extremely resistant to physical attacks. We haven't seen much of this in the past, but this is the non-elemental element, the physical element. Most of the time, people won't have any resistances to this at all, but as you can see here, these guys have 80% resistance. On top of their 20 defense, means that a physical attack is going to do next to no damage. So I think, for that reason, on Slinik, we're definitely going to want to use Fire Breath. And how are we feeling in terms of... Do we feel confident we can take out the one with 100 HP with Slinik here? I don't know. Previously, we saw that he was dealing more damage than Donovan with his spells, but I'm not sure if that's going to continue to be the case. Apparently it is. So I'm sorry, Donovan, but Slinik is maybe just better than you across the board at this stage. As for Mardek, similar story to what we had with Slinik, in that your attacks are not going to do very much. However, you don't have much of an alternative, other than, say, maybe healing yourself. That seems like that could be worthwhile right about now. And that means we'll have a couple of turns here before this Dark Elemental goes again. Maybe we can deal a little bit more damage if we aren't splitting our attacks, or spells that is, between two Dark Elementals. If we do that, Charlotte can almost take this guy out. And maybe if we flame on Donovan, that'll do the trick. Okay, so no special loot from that guy. Let's take a look at our map here, because we can see there's at least one chest in this direction. So let's head down that way. And I'm thinking, what might we be able to do in terms of our skills, items, to anticipate to prepare ourselves for the types of enemies we're going to go up against here. For example, something that comes to mind is, say, what if we were to swap over to our Sun Sword? Because that is light elemental relative to our non-elemental Xanthusian Scimitar. And this, it does have higher damage, 33 and 10% crit chance, and +1 strength, compared to the Sun Sword's only 28 attack and 4 crit and no additional strength. However, I think, based on what we were seeing with those previous enemies we were just fighting, having that light elemental component is going to be key here, because if we're fighting a bunch of dark elemental enemies, presumably most of them are going to be quite weak to light. So let's swap that in. I think actually the preferable weapon would be our champion sword, but I'm not necessarily sure where we have that at the moment, because I'm not immediately seeing it here. This is the mithril sword, which looks somewhat similar, but is different. Keyblade is non-elemental. We have several of Dugan's weapons left over. The other thing that comes to mind is, I think we actually forgot about this previously, but Slinik does have the Sun Axe as well that we picked up in the Sun Temple before we technically had Slinik as a party member. It also would have slightly lower damage than his current weapon. His current weapon has 38 attack, whereas this one has 35. However, again, it'll have light elemental miss. So I think that is probably more than worth that slight attack decrease. So that's at least what immediately comes to mind. Let's keep our eyes out for other ways we might be able to improve, though. So, here is that first chest. And it's an Alchemist Fire. And so it is that offensive potion that deals fire damage. We could give this to Slinik for the sake of giving him some. However, he does, of course, still have his Fire Breath ability. I suppose if he's out of MP, this might still give a way for him to deal some fire damage, but Mardek is probably the one who is least capable of dealing elemental damage, at least at this stage. Charlotte can't deal fire, but she has air, at least. This looks like the second chest here. It is, okay. Heather, okay, so that means some MP regeneration. Not bad, we'll throw it on Donovan, just to spread it out a little bit, and it seems like there's nothing else in this location, so we'll head back up, and... Okay, so bring on the Nightmare Fuel. I mean, we are in the Dark Temple, yes, but didn't really want to see eye stalks. So they do have a fair share of magic defense, no physical defense. Similarly, bunch of dark resistance and very weak to light, little bit of weakness to fire, actually. So that might be reason enough for us to put Donovan's Soul Strike back on so that his attacks go from non-elemental back to fire. but that's a future concern. As for right now, we actually want to be going physical. And do we want to deliberately target the one with the most HP or the least HP? I'm rather skeptical that Charla will be able to take these guys out in one hit, so maybe we target one with a lot of HP here. Yeah, and gets rid of roughly half, okay. They use Void, and more Void, and Blinding Gas, but fortunately seems as though they didn't hit the mark there. I would assume that Blinding Gas has the chance of causing blind, but that didn't seem to happen. So we lucked out there. And Donovan, like we were saying, in theory, might be best long-term for us to switch back over to your Soul Strike ability so that you can have Fire Elemental attacks. But you miss. And then Slinik, with your new Light Elemental attacks here, you should be able to one-shot these guys, I would think. So let's attack one with a lot of HP. Oh my goodness, nobody can hit. Hold on. Do these guys have high evasion? No. They have no evasion. Is the Dark Temple so dark that everyone has lower accuracy? Is that a thing? Previously, I would have thought that was a silly thought that might have flown through her head, but at this rate, people are missing enough that I might actually consider it. Okay, now Charla, I think we still go for it. Can you finish this guy off? Not quite, which means that's an actual blind that time. And that is actual damage. Donovan, you are blinded. Can you still finish this guy off? You can. Okay, so he's more accurate when he's blinded, at least on that occasion. Slinik, can you get the job done here? You can. So good to see that both Slinik and Mardek seem to be able to deal tons of damage here. Means that hopefully we will be able to take out people in one hit, even the big enemies with those guys, and a creepy eye. Fantastic. Just lovely. Okay, Charlotte did master plus 10% damage, the physical offensive reaction, which is good. That is coming from her new Poisony Spear. There is still one other reaction, the Poison Reaction. So, she has the damage one, but I believe she needs 10 more, if I'm not mistaken, to get the Poison aspect mastered up so that she can swap over to another spear and still have access to that. So it looks like this is the door here, because we've made it through and picked up the only chests in this area. Oh! Well, you guys are a little bit different. Somewhat familiar, yes, they do look like the monsters we fought in the past. But you know, you have your mohawks, neon mohawks at that. Nails going through your jaw, if I'm not mistaken. And a blood tattoo, maybe? I don't know. Maybe let's not ask too many questions here. Let's take a look at these guys. Okay, so they're also very resistant to dark and very weak to light. We probably could have guessed that. They're actually a little bit resistant to fire. So maybe somewhat questionable as to whether or not we ought to put on the Soul Strike back on Donovan. No physical or magic defenses here. So my guess in that case would be that these guys, between their 25 strength and 40 attack, my guess would be that they are strong hitters, but that they aren't very good defensively. They do have a lot of HP though. So I think Mardek and Slinik is going to be important for you guys to get your hits in here. Don't miss. Knock on wood. Donovan, I suppose it doesn't really matter if you go with a spell or an attack. Spells, I suppose, do take MP, so maybe let's deal a little bit of damage to the guy who had the most HP there. But again, oh, Donovan is still blinded. Okay, so we should have done something about that in between battles. So, Slinik, do you have enough damage to take this guy out? Based on how much damage you were dealing in the previous fight, I would think the answer is yes. It was kind of close, but you did pull it off. Mardek, same idea here. Okay, good. That's comforting. No special items out of that fight. Let's make a point here to remove the blindness from Donovan before we forget. And then we will carry on further into this area, even if that's maybe not something that we're feeling so inclined to do. So, we head deeper into the Dark Temple. 2 chests in this area. And a save crystal. Okay, well that's a welcome sight. Glad to see that. And then we see that there are actually 2 walls here. A double wall, meaning we will have to get both a purple switch and a blue switch to make it through this area. And so that means we'll have to be on the lookout for those. And based on what our map is showing us right now, it seems as though there might be several other areas leading off of here. So this will in effect, be the main room of the Dark Temple, our hub spot, in a way. Okay, so we have a couple of Dark Elementals again. Let's try to take these guys out, but remind me... Yes, magic is the way to go, not physical attacks. So, let's target this guy here. And is it best to try to take one out? Maybe it is. Rather than splitting our damage. Oh, Donovan, you just missed it here, and I was caught off guard there just a smidge. And so you two both did take damage, and a fair bit of it at that. Our two least tanky characters, so that does mean that if they get another hit like that, then they might be toast. We want to be careful of that. We do have one Dark Elemental who is very low at this stage. Now, they may be very resistant to physical attacks, however, they are also very weak to light. So that makes me curious as to how all those things balance out. This is a bit of a risk here, but let's try attacking with Sonic and see what happens. It is more than enough damage to take that guy out. So that's also a good sign, and I would think that by extension, that means that Mardek should be pretty comfortable taking this guy out too. Good to see. Okay, so let's keep on heading down here. And like I was saying before, I think this will basically be the hub of the Dark Temple, and we will head off in any of a number of different directions, but ultimately end up heading back here on a couple of different occasions. And directly in front of us, we see there's something here. It's a miasmal chalice. This is an object called a miasmal chalice. When you defeat monsters in this temple, their dark essence is added to this chalice, filling it. Fill it with 100 essence, and you can take it as your own. The chalice is 9% full. You cannot take it yet. Okay, so that is actually one of the reasons why, when we were talking earlier about potentially doing a little bit of grinding in the Sandflow Caves, we were thinking maybe that was worthwhile, but we might want to wait for a better opportunity. This is that opportunity. So, the miasmal chalice fills up whenever you take out some enemies in this location. For every enemy that you defeat, you fill the chalice by 1%. So, in order to reach 100% full, you need to kill 100 enemies in this location. So for that reason, this is a good place for us to do things like level up a little bit, master some abilities, and things of that nature. Work on some reactions in particular. I'm thinking the magic defensive reactions, I think we have several people who are quite a bit behind at this point, and based on things like the eye stalks we were fighting earlier, and those dark elementals as well, I think we'll find that several of the enemies that we fight here are going to be exclusively, or very close to exclusively, dealing magic attacks. Ooh, this looks like a chest, actually. Let's check this out. And it's Dark Essence. We found one of these earlier. That has actually 3 in that stack. And that is a crafting item. And we have seen at least one thing we can make out of it. So there is a door down here. What? Excuse me? Go? So this is, like some kind of Dark Eldritch Temple of Doom, sealed off from the world for, like, ever? Spooky. How we getting here? Hide my ways. I used to be a bandit, you know. Well, you do know. Yeah. I learned some useful skills from that. I can say that, at least. Want to see me wares, friend? Thanks, Go. Okay, so it does seem like we actually sold a couple of Sun Axes to Goat previously, and so he's still holding on to those. And this might also be an opportunity for us to get rid of some items that might be clogging up our inventory a bit. Mardek does have a lot of stuff here, but I'm a little bit hesitant to do that just yet, maybe with the exception being with some of our fire opals, because we have a bunch of those. As for how many exactly, I'm not entirely sure, because they're probably split across several different people's inventories. We have several people currently equipping topazes, so I think we're probably safe to sell this one here. And as we saw previously, we're going to get them to drop very often. That's not a huge concern. Okay, yeah, like for example here, we have plenty of fire opals. No problem. We've actually stacked them in our inventory, and we opted not to do that. Probably could have. So be it, though. Okay. Anything else here that we might want to pick up from Goat? There are potions, things that will heal some HP, a lot of it at that. And also, there were these bangles, We saw previously, and they were 25,000 gold pieces, which is a lot. It is still a lot. We could theoretically afford them, yes. But is it worth it? They do give plus 20% HP or 20% MP, with some elemental resistances and a little bit of spirit and MP in one case, or vitality and HP in the other case. Not necessarily sure that this is the right time to do that, because first and foremost, we're concerned about dark for the moment, and earth and water are secondary or maybe even tertiary at this stage. So probably another time for that. But other than that, I mean, that is certainly odd to see Gopier, and this is... Okay, yeah, I mean, we did just step into that big black circle in the middle there that looked rather ominous. Exit. It's locked tight, but there is a keyhole. With the right key, you'll be able to get through. Okay. Good to know. Let's head back then. That seems like a location that we'll want to ultimately double back to, at least once we do ultimately get that key. As for our other options here, we saw there was a chest in one corner. Maybe in the opposite corner there will also be one. Okay, so we have a combination of eye stalks and punk monsters here. So, as for what we want to do, I think we've established that Mardek and or Slinik can likely deal enough damage to take these guys out in one hit, I would hope. The eye stalks, probably a similar story, actually. However, I'm not sure we've done any magic attacks against the eye stalks yet, because they do have fairly high magical defense. They are somewhat weak to fire, though, so at least in Donovan's case, he should be somewhat effective. Charla might find this is not terribly useful, so maybe we go with a physical attack from her. She is still working on that poison reaction. We'll do that. The eye stalks will get a turn here. Oh, we did not heal Charla in between, and fortunately that was just them blinding, not actually damaging Charla. Otherwise, she would have gone down there for sure. Okay, so for Donovan here, can you say get rid of this eye stalk altogether? You can. Okay, so that's good. Slinik, we're probably going to want to use your turn to delete this punk monster, if possible. Good to see. And then that allows Mardek, kinda sorta, to heal Charla here. Well, except if we were to attack with him, probably could just get rid of this eye stalk and then the battle will be over, and we'll try to remember to heal in between. Yeah, that seems like that's probably the way to go. Okay, and Liquid Light is the blindness removal potion, which could be useful given how we saw that Charlotte did get blinded there. That's +1 strength for Mardek, which is interesting, because that means that in theory, we could swap out one of his accessories, and what we might want to put there is a good question, but I think we might have an answer. And I think that that answer could be something like an Onyx Ring. Because, although I believe Mardek has already mastered Bright Eyes, which we can confirm here, yes he has, it also comes with 50% dark resistance. So for that reason, if you found that you were able to load up on Onyx Rings, which there were some that dropped back in Chapter 2, when we were going through the area after the original Morik fight, we got, I think, 1 or 2 there, and you're also able to purchase them in Cambria. If you can load up on them, obviously if you put on 2, and that adds up to 100% dark resistance, that could be very useful in this area. Now, Mardek, as we were saying earlier, does start off with a minus 20% dark resistance because he is light elemental and light is weak to dark. So that will cover for his weakness, at least a little bit. So I think that's a good option there. And this does look like the other chest in this area. And right on cue, it's another Onyx Ring. So that is very timely. And might we want to put it on Mardek here? Could put it on someone else as well, I suppose. But I feel as if, in Mardek's case, it would be particularly helpful, given how he would otherwise be rather vulnerable to dark. However, let's double check if, yeah, Donovan has mastered his +1 agility on the Topaz, so that's not doing him much good at this stage. Charla, all done with the Moonstone Ring, and the Moonstone Ring is given light resistance. Now that's not going to do much for her. Not in the Dark Temple, I wouldn't think. And as for Slinik, he's 1 battle away from mastering +1 agility. So, let's double check and make sure that Slinik is using that skill at the moment. He is, okay. Just want to make sure we haven't had him sitting on 14 out of 15 for an extended period of time. That would probably not be great. So, would we prefer to have this on Donovan, Charla, Slinik, or even a second one on Mardek? I do kind of like keeping the air pendants and fire pendants on people for the time being, because like we were saying earlier, there are a lot of people in the Dark Temple who deal particularly, or in some cases exclusively, magic damage. So this is probably the best opportunity we've had thus far to work on these magic reactions. So let's try to keep those, and maybe that means that we should do things like take off a snake stone. Actually, we should verify if Charla has finished that one. I don't think we necessarily checked that. She has, okay. So yeah, let's do that. I think Charla, being the lowest HP of our characters, is probably someone who we also should make sure that we're being mindful of how much HP she has, otherwise she's going to go down fairly frequently. Could probably remove Taint as well to get rid of that blindness. She may not be attacking physically all that often, but in case she does, probably a good idea to get rid of it. We could, of course, head back to the save crystal as well to heal up, if and when necessary. Okay, so more ice stocks plus punk monsters here. This is a bit of an odd combination, it seems, because what we really want is to be able to have people like Slinik and Mardek go in as soon as possible and take people out in one hit. Charla and Donovan seem like they are not capable of making that happen. So we use a normal attack here. Ooh, the poison is helpful, but I don't think it's going to be enough to take this guy out with the poison alone. It's not. And they blind Slinik. That is concerning, because that does mean that Slinik may not be able to take someone out on his turn. Let's try hitting the punk monster here. If Slinik does not land a hit, then it's going to be up to Mardek. Slinik does not. Mardek, no pressure or anything. Okay. Glad to see it. Now, this Ice Stock likely will still get the chance to take a turn here. That is the downside, is had Slinik hit and take out the punk monster, Mardek would have taken out the Ice Stock. No problem, it doesn't take a turn here. But unless Charlotte can take it out in one hit, which I'm skeptical of, she does continue the poisons, but does get in a void for some damage on Donovan. And for him, I suppose it doesn't matter too much if we use spells or attacks, and the Ice Stock is weaker to attack, so let's do that, and take it out. More big creepy eyes. You know, it would perhaps be totally fine with me if we were not to pick up any more of those ever. And there is Slinik, mastering the +1 agility as we anticipated. And I think there's actually one other thing that comes to mind that we could potentially throw on here. And that is that I thought we had, yes, the Blood Opal, that Mardek and Slinik had both mastered the drain 10% HP reaction, but I don't think that either Donovan or Charla has. Now that Donovan is done with the Topaz, I think that makes some sense. Because that means that as long as he has the RP to do it, and he does, we can turn that on. And he's not going to deal as much damage as Slinik or Mardek, so it's not going to be quite as much that he's healing from that, but it might still add up to be somewhat significant. Every now and then might be enough to be the difference between having to heal him and not having to heal him. So, let's take a look here. There are still 3 doors that we have not yet checked. Let's maybe go off to this one first. I suppose in some ways it's the closest. Okay, purely eye stocks here, which means it's going to be hard to take any of these guys out until they get a chance to take a turn. This is what I mean, where we have several enemies now that are seemingly using only magic attacks, so great opportunity to master some of those magic defensive reactions. So we could, whoa, well done, Donovan. We could deliberately do something like load up on those Onyx rings, get as much dark resistance on everyone as possible, and just sit back and wait and watch and react as they use their attacks on us and master up those skills as safely as possible. And tell you what, it might be worth double checking if we have any of those in our item storage right now. We might find that to be useful. Let's attack the one with the most HP with Slinik. And then Mardek, I suppose, you should also be more than capable of taking these guys out. And again with the big creepy eyes. So yeah, if we were to actually double back here for just a second and look at item storage, what will we find here? Will we find, say, another Onyx Ring? I think that would be very useful to use that right around now. I think, Charla, you weren't using one of the pendants for a magic reaction, although you might have a spare somewhere that we might want to throw on if we're making a point of working on those. Though I'm not immediately seeing any. So in that case, yes, I think it does make sense to throw on a second one here, which means that between the two of these Onyx Rings, she's going to have 100% dark resistance. So that is going to be key, because that means that she's basically going to be invulnerable to damage as long as enemies are attacking with dark damage. And it seems like most of the time that's going to be the case. We're probably going to get the occasional physical attacks as well. So most of the time, at least, Charla should be pretty safe. Other than that, we do actually have Zack's Spiked Hide Armor lying around in here. And that is really good because it has some defensive reactions that normally would be very difficult to get on spellcasters like Charla and Donovan. However, they are able to wear this armor because it is technically a light armor, like a robe. So that I think we should pay attention to. And then similarly with the bandit leather, I'm not sure if anyone other than Mardek has mastered the skills on this. So that's something else to bear in mind. Pickaxe pendant has damage soak 10. That might be something that we want people to pick up as well. And other than that, we see some of Dugan's old swords. Green chainmail, Vern's old armor, also has a magic reaction here. So that could be worthwhile. Other than that, we have the Shadow Blade, which is where we were at one point in time, I think, ever so briefly working on the degeneration ability with Mardek. However, this is a dark elemental weapon, and, you know, that's probably not the best idea to be using that right around now. So we'll pass on that for the time being. And other than that, we could potentially use something like the Lapis Lily to resist Silence and Curse. We haven't seen those things yet, but that seems thematically consistent with the Dark Temple, so that might be something to consider throwing on just in case, and the Belt of Movement is always strong just for that additional agility and a little bit of defense as well. So I think for that reason, let's at least stockpile those things, have them on hand so that we can swap over them whenever we want. But I'm noticing that, at the moment at least, I'm not seeing Mardek's Champion Sword, which is concerning, because that is actually a higher damage weapon than the Sun Sword. It is also light elemental, and it has a higher crit chance. I believe it's 32 attack and 10% crit chance, so that would be the way to go. What I'm wondering is if maybe we might have finished Chapter 2 with Vern equipping it, meaning that, as things currently stand, that Champion Sword is not on us. So that's unfortunate. There's not much we can do about that at the moment, if in fact that is the case. Otherwise, maybe it's just somewhere buried in our inventory at the moment and I'm not immediately seeing it. But, at least for the moment, using the Sun Sword as a plan B seems like that's a reasonable substitute. And I think with that, this is probably a good place for us to wrap up here. We have a lot more to explore in the Dark Temple. As for what we are going to find there, I don't know. I don't know if we want to know. But I'll see you next time.